Hello and welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to resume the read along session for the chapter on the age of conflict circa 1000 to 1200 AD. The Turkish conquest of North India. After the Ghaznavid conquest of the Punjab, two distinct patterns of relations between the Muslims and the Hindus were at work. One was the lure for plunder, which resulted in raids into the Gangetic Valley and Rajputana by the successors of Mahmud. The rulers of the Rajput states put up a spirited resistance against these raids and won victories against the Turks on a number of occasions. But the Ghaznavid state was no longer a powerful state, and the gaining of a number of victories against it in local battles made the Rajput rulers more complacent. At the second level, Muslim traders were allowed, even welcomed in the country, since they helped in strengthening and augmenting India's trade with Central and West Asian countries, and thus increasing the income of the state. Colonies of Muslim traders sprang up in some of the towns in North India. In the wake of these came a number of Muslim religious preachers called the Sufis to Punjab. So the Sufis to Punjab came in the wake of the Muslim traders who were allowed to uh, uh, come to India because for the relations they would establish with West Asia and Central Asia because of the trade. Uh, the Sufis preached the gospel of love, faith, and dedication to the one God. They directed their preachings mainly towards the Muslim settlers, but they influenced some Hindus also. Thus, a process of interaction between Islam and Hindu religion and society was started. Lahore became a center of Arabic and Persian languages and literature. Hindu generals such as Tilak, a barber by caste, commanded the Ghaznavid armies in which Hindu Jat soldiers were also recruited. These two processes might have continued indefinitely but for another large-scale change in the political situation in Central Asia. Towards the middle of the 12th century, another group of Turkish tribesmen who were partly Buddhist and partly pagan shattered the power of the Seljuk Turks. In the vacuum, two new powers rose to prominence: the Khwarezmi Empire, based in Iran, and the Ghurid Empire, based in Ghur in northwest Afghanistan. The Ghurids had started as vassals of Ghazni, but had soon thrown off their yoke. The power of the Ghurids increased under Sultan Alauddin, who and earned the title of the world burner Jahan Soz because during the middle of the 12th century he ravaged Ghazni and burned it to the ground in revenge for the treatment that had been meted out to his brothers at Ghazni. The rising power of Khwarezmi Empire severely limited the Central Asian ambition of the Ghurids. Khorasan, which was the bone of contention between the two, was soon conquered by Khwarezm Shah. This left no option for the Ghurids but to look for expansion towards India. In 1173, Shahabuddin Muhammad, also known as Muizuddin Muhammad bin Sam, ascended the throne at Ghazni while his elder brother was ruling at Ghur. Proceeding by way of the Gomal Pass, Muizuddin Muhammad conquered Multan and Uch. In 1178, he attempted to penetrate into Gujarat by marching across the Rajputana desert, but the Gujarat ruler completely routed him in a battle near Mount Abu, and Muizuddin Muhammad was lucky in escaping alive. He now realized the necessity of creating a suitable base in Punjab before venturing upon the conquest of India. Accordingly, he launched a campaign against the Ghaznavid possessions in the Punjab. By 1190, Muizuddin Muhammad had conquered Peshawar, Lahore, and Sialkot and was poised for a thrust towards Delhi and Gangetic Doab. Meanwhile, events had not been standing still in North India. The Chauhan power had been steadily growing. The Chauhan rulers had defeated and killed a large number of Turks who had tried to invade Rajasthan, most probably from the Punjab side. They had also captured Delhi, called Dhillika, from the Tomars around the middle of the century. The expansion of the Chauhan powers towards the Punjab brought them into conflict with the Ghaznavid rulers of the area, the Battle of Tehran. This is a very prominent battle. This is a battle between these two ambitious rulers, Muizuddin Muhammad and Prithvi Raj, was inevitable. The conflict started with rival claims for Tabhar Hinda. In the battle which was fought at Tehran in 1191, the Ghurid forces were completely routed, Muizuddin's life being saved by a young Khalji horseman. Prithviraj now pushed on to Tabhar Hinda and conquered it after a 12-month siege. Little attempt was made by Prithviraj to oust the Ghurids from the Punjab. Perhaps he felt that it was another of recurrent Turkish race and that the Ghurid ruler would be content to rule over Punjab. This gave Muizuddin Muhammad time to regroup his forces and make another bid for India the following year. He rejected the proposal said to be made by Prithviraj to leave Punjab under the possession of the Ghurid ruler. The Second Battle of Tehran in 1192 is regarded as one of the turning points in Indian history. So there was a first battle in 1191 in the same Tehran where Prithviraj routed the forces of Muizuddin Muhammad and he escaped. He was actually uh, saved by a young Khilji horseman, but then he regrouped his forces in Punjab, and then a next battle was fought in 1192, which is regarded as one of the turning points in the history of India. Muizuddin Muhammad had made careful preparations for the contest. It is said that he marched with 1,20,000 men, including a force of heavy cavalry, fully equipped with steel coats and armor, and 10,000 mountain archers. It is not correct to think that Prithviraj was negligent of the affairs of the state and spoke to the situation when it was too late. It is true that at that time, Skanda, the general of the last victorious campaign, was engaged elsewhere. As soon as Prithviraj realized the nature of the Ghurid threat, he appealed to all the Rajas of the northern India for help. We are told many Rajas sent contingents to help him, but Jai Chandra, the ruler of Kannauj, stayed away. The legend that this was because Prithviraj had abducted Jayachandra's daughter Sanyogita, who was in love with him, is not accepted by many historians. The story was written much later as a romance by the poet Chandabardai and includes many improbable events. As we have seen, there had been an old outstanding rivalry between the two states, hence it is not surprising that Jayachandra stayed away. Prithviraj is said to have fielded a force of 3 lakh, including a large body of cavalry and 300 elephants. The strength of the forces on both sides may have been exaggerated. The numerical strength of the Indian forces was probably greater, but the Turkish army was better organized and led. The battle was mainly a battle between the cavalry. The superior organization, skill, and speed of movements of the Turkish cavalry and their mounted archers and heavy cavalry ultimately decided the issue. So it was the superior organization on the Turkish side. Also, there was a speed of movement of the Turkish cavalries and the mounted archers and heavy cavalry, which ultimately decided this issue. A large number of Indian soldiers lost their lives. Prithviraj escaped but was captured near Saraswati Sirsa. The Turkish armies captured the fortress of Hasi, Saraswati, and Samana. They then attacked and captured Ajmer. Prithviraj was allowed to rule over Ajmer for some time, for we have points of this period giving the date and legend. Prithviraj Deva on one side and the words Shri Muhammad Sam on the other. Soon after, Prithviraj was executed on charge of conspiracy, and Prithviraj's son succeeded him. Delhi also was restored to its Tomar ruler. But this policy was reversed soon after. The ruler of Delhi was ousted and Delhi was made a base for further Turkish advance into the Ganga Valley. Following a rebellion, a Muslim army recaptured Ajmer and installed a Turkish general there. Prithviraj's son moved to Ranthambore and founded a new powerful Chauhan kingdom there. Thus, the Delhi area and eastern Rajasthan passed under the Turkish rule. So under the leadership of Muizuddin Muhammad, there were two battles which were fought in Tehran. The first one was fought in 1191 and the second in 1192. In the first battle of Tehran in 1191, Prithviraj's army actually routed Muizuddin Muhammad and he actually had to retreat. So beyond that, in the next year, he actually regrouped his forces, and because of strong organization skills and mounted cavalry, also mounted archers and heavy cavalry, also the speed of movements, these gave an edge to the Turkish armies. And although the Indian forces were probably greater in number than the Turkish ones, but the mounted archers and the other factors of the organization actually led to the victory of the Turkish army, and Prithviraj was captured, and he was captured near Saraswati. So the forts of Hasi, Saraswati, and Samana fell. Thereby, Prithviraj was allowed to rule over Ajmer for some time, but he was then executed on charges of conspiracy. So after that, Prithviraj's son ascended the throne, and he ruled for some time. Delhi was restored to the Tomar rulers from which Prithviraj captured it, and but it was not for a long time. And then the Turkish decided to make Delhi as the base for their operations, for their expansion to the Ganga Valley. So they also recaptured Ajmer and installed a Turkish general over there. Prithviraj's son hence moved to Ranthambore and founded a new and more powerful Chauhan empire. Hence, the area of Delhi and eastern Rajasthan was passed on to the Turkish. The Turkish conquest of the Ganga Valley, Bihar, and Bengal. Between 1192 and 1206, Turkish rule was extended over the Ganga Jamuna Doab and its neighboring areas. Bihar and Bengal were also overrun. In order to establish themselves in the Doab, the Turks had first to defeat the powerful Gehedwal kingdom of Kannauj. The Gehedwala ruler Jay Chandra had been ruling over the state peacefully for 2 decades. Perhaps he was not very capable warrior because he had earlier suffered a reverse at the hands of Sena kings of the Bengal. Also, in the Battle of Tehran in 1192, Prithviraj made request for all the northern rulers, the northern Indian kings, to come and collaborate with him. But it is said that many of the rulers sent their contingent forces on to Prithviraj. But it was Chandra, who was the ruler of Kannauj, who didn't send it. And we are reading about Jayachandra, who was the Khedwala ruler over here. So the Turkish eventually came on up to his kingdom as well. After Tehran, Muizuddin returned to Ghazni, leaving the affairs in India in the hands of one of his trusted slaves, Qutbuddin Aibak. So Qutbuddin Aibak was actually a slave of Muizuddin Muhammad. During the next 2 years, the Turks overran the parts of Upper Doab without any opposition from the Gahadwalas. So this is another name of Muizuddin Muhammad mentioned over here. It was Shahabuddin Muhammad, also known as Muizuddin Muhammad bin Sam. Okay, so after Tehran, Muizuddin returned to Ghazni, leaving the affairs in India in the hands of one of his trusted slaves, Qutbuddin Aibak. During the next 2 years, the Turks overran parts of Upper Doab without any opposition from the Gahadwalas. In 1194, Muizuddin returned to India. He crossed the Jamuna with 50,000 cavalry and moved towards Kannauj. A hotly contested battle between Muizuddin and Jayachandra was fought at Chandavar near Kannauj. We are told that Jayachandra had almost carried the day when he was killed by an arrow and his army was totally defeated. Muizuddin now moved on to Banaras, which was ravaged, a large number of temples there being destroyed. The Turks established their hold over a huge territory extending up to the borders of Bihar. Thus, the Battle of Tehran and Chandavar laid the foundations of the Turkish rule in North India. So, this is a very important line. The Battle of Tehran and Chandavar laid the foundation of the Turkish rule in North India. The task of consolidating the conquest thus one proved, however, to be an onerous task which occupied the Turks for almost 50 years. We shall study this in a subsequent chapter. Muizuddin lived till 1206. During this period, he occupied the powerful forts of Bayana and Gwalior to guard the southern flank of Delhi. A little later, Aibak conquered Kalinjar, Mahoba, and Khajuraho from the Chandel rulers of the area. With a base in the Doab, the Turks launched a series of raids in the neighboring areas. Aibak defeated Bhima III, the ruler of Gujarat, and Anhilwara and a number of other towns were ravaged and plundered. Though a Muslim governor was appointed to rule the place, he was soon ousted. This showed that the Turks were not yet strong enough to be able to rule over such far flung areas. The Turks, however, were more successful in the east. A Khalji officer, Bakhtiyar Khalji, whose uncle had fought at the Battle of Tehran, had been appointed in charge of some of the areas beyond Panaras. He had taken advantage of this to make frequent raids into Bihar, which was at that time in the nature of no man's land. During these raids, he had attacked and destroyed some of the famous Buddhist monasteries of Bihar, Nalanda, and Vikramshila, which had no protector left. So it was because of the misdeeds of Bakhtiyar Khalji that the renowned Buddhist universities of Nalanda and Vikramshila were destroyed. So you have to remember this. Bakhtiyar Khilji was the one who actually destroyed Bihar, Nalanda, and Vikramshila. And it was during the reign of Qutbuddin Aibak, who was actually a slave of uh, Muizuddin and was actually taking care of India during his time. He had also accumulated much wealth and gathered many followers around him. During his raids, he also collected information about the routes to Bengal. Bengal was a rich place because its internal resources and flourishing foreign trade had given it the reputation of being fabulously rich. Making careful preparations, Bakhtiyar Khilji marched with an army towards Nadia, a pilgrim center where the Sena ruler Lakshmana Sen had built a palace and to which he had gone on pilgrimage. Turkish horse merchants had become a common sight in those days. Pretending to be a horse merchant, Bakhtiyar Khalji made a sudden attack on the palace and created a great confusion. The Sena ruler Lakshmana Khilji had been a noted warrior. Sorry, the Sena ruler Lakshmana Sena, not Lakshmana Khilji. The Sena ruler Lakshmana Sena had been a noted warrior. However, taken by surprise and thinking about the main Turkish army had arrived, he slipped away by a back door. The Turkish army must have been near, for they soon arrived and overpowered the garrison. All the wealth of the ruler, including his wives and children, were captured. These events are placed in 1204. Bakhtiyar then marched and occupied the Sena capital Lakhnauti without any opposition. Lakshmana Sena moved to Sonargaon in South Bengal, where he and his successors continued to rule. Although Bakhtiyar Khalji was formally appointed the governor of Bengal by Muizuddin, he ruled over it as a virtual independent ruler. But he was not to enjoy his position for long. He foolishly undertook an expedition into the Brahmaputra Valley in Assam. Though writers say that he wanted to lead an expedition into Tibet, the Magh rulers of Assam retreated and allowed the Turkish armies to come in as far as they could. At last, the tired and exhausted armies found they could advance no further and decided to retreat. They could find no provisions. They could find no provisions on the way and were constantly harassed by the Assamese armies. Tired and weakened by hunger and illness, the Turkish army had to face a battle in which there was a wide river in front and the Assamese army at the back. The Turkish army suffered a total defeat. Bakhtiyar Khalji was able to come back with a few followers with the help of some mountain tribes, but his health and spirits were broken. He was mortally sick and confined to the bed when one of his own armies stabbed him to death. When Aibak and the Turkish and Khalji chief were trying to expand and consolidate the Turkish gains in North India, Muizuddin and his brother were trying to expand the Ghurid Empire into Central Asia. So there were two subsequent expansionist policies being followed. The first one was followed by Aibak and the Turkish and Khalji chiefs who were trying to consolidate and expand their empire in North India, and the next one was from the side of Muizuddin and his brothers who were trying to expand the Ghurid Empire into Central Asia. The imperialistic ambitions of the Ghurids brought them into headlong conflict with the powerful Khwarezmi Empire. In 1203, Muizzuddin suffered a disastrous defeat at the hands of the Khwarezmi ruler. This defeat came as a blessing in disguise to the Turks, for they had to bid goodbye to their Central Asian ambitions and to concentrate their energies exclusively on India. This paved the way for the emergence after some time of a Turkish state based exclusively in India. In the immediate context, however, the defeat of Muizzuddin emboldened many of his opponents in India to rebel. The Khokhars, a warlike tribe in western Punjab, rose and cut off the communications between Lahore and Ghazni. Muizzuddin led his last campaign into India in 1206 in order to deal with the Khokhar rebellion. He resorted to large-scale slaughter of the Khokhars and cowed them down. On his way back to Ghazni, he was killed by a Muslim fanatic belonging to a rival sect. Muizzuddin Muhammad bin Sam has often been compared to Muhammad of Ghazni. So, as a warrior, Mahmud Ghazni was more successful than Muizzuddin, having never suffered a defeat in India or in Central Asia. He also ruled over a larger empire outside India, but it has to be kept in mind that Muizzuddin had to contend with larger and better organized states in India than Mahmud. Though less successful in Central Asia, his political achievements in India were greater. But it was Mahmud's conquest of the Punjab which paved the way for Muizzuddin's successes in North India. Considering that the conditions facing the two were very different, no useful comparisons can be made between the two. The political and military motives of the two in India were also different in important respects. Neither was really concerned with Islam. Once a ruler submitted, he was allowed to rule over his territories unless for some other reasons it was necessary to annex his kingdom in part or in whole. Hindu officers and soldiers were used by Mahmud as well as by Muizzuddin, but neither scrupled to use the slogan of Islam for their purposes and to justify their plunder of Indian cities and temples in the name of religion. The causes of defeat of the Rajputs. The defeat of the leading states of North India within a short space of about 15 years by the Turkish armies also needs some explanation. It may be stated as an axiom that a country is conquered by another only when it suffers from social and political weaknesses or become economically and militarily backward compared to its neighbors. Recent research shows that Turks did not have any superior weapons at their disposal as compared to the Indians. So, what we could see that there can be contentions between two countries only when there is a political or social weakness on one of the countries, or if one of the countries become economically and militarily backward compared to its neighbors. The Iron Stirrup, which had changed the mode of warfare in Europe, as we've noted earlier, had spread in India from the 8th century onwards. The Turkish bows could shoot arrows to a longer distance, but the Indian bows were supposed to be more accurate and more deadly, the arrowheads being generally dipped in poison. In hand-to-hand combat, the Indian swords were considered to be best in the world. The Indians also had the advantage of elephants, perhaps the Turks had horses which were swifter and were more sturdy than the horses imported into India. The weaknesses of the Indians were social and organizational. So this is the true weakness of the Indian rulers. It was social and organizational. The growth of feudalism, that is the rise of local landed elements and chiefs, had weakened the administrative structure and military organizations of the Indian state. The rulers had to depend more on the various chiefs who rarely acted in coordination and quickly dispersed to their area after battle. On the other hand, the tribal structure of the Turks and the growth of Ikta and Khalisa system enabled the Turks to maintain large standing armies which could be kept in field for a longer time. So the weakness on the Indian part was social and organizational in nature, and it could be attributed to the growth of feudalism, and because of which there was a rise of the local land elements who wanted to claim more authority over the areas which they ruled, and because of which there was a lack of coordination between these different feudal chiefs and that of the ruler. The rulers now had to depend more on the various chiefs who rarely acted in coordination. Whereas on the other hand, The tribal structure of the Turks and the growth of Iqta and Khalisa system enabled the Turks to maintain large standing armies which could be kept in field for a long time. So the Turks benefited from the Iqta and Khalisa system. Also, the Indians were not accustomed to move as an organized body of horsemen, which could cover long distances and fight and maneuver. Nor does it seem the Rajputs had large bodies of mounted archers or heavily armed cavalry. But for these factors, the Rajput states, many of which had great human and physical resources at their disposal than the Ghaznavid and Ghurid empires, would not have suffered defeat or would have been able to recover if they had been defeated in a battle. The social and organizational structure of Turks also gave them many advantages. The Ekta system, which grew slowly in West Asia, implied that the Turkish chief was allotted a piece of land as Ekta from which he could collect land revenues and taxes and due to the states. In return, he had to maintain a body of troops for the service of the ruler. The grant was not hereditary and was held at the pleasure of the Sultan, who could transfer him to any place. The Sultan drew revenues directly from the pieces of land which were called Khalisa. This enabled him to maintain a large standing army. While the states rose and fell in West Asia, as in West Asia, unlike the Rajput states, in each state the armed forces were more highly centralized. Many of the Turkish rulers, Turkish officers, were slaves who had been trained for warfare and grew in the Sultan's service, and on whom the Sultan could place total trust. So there were two major systems which were the deployment in Turkish regime. So the first one was Ikta, in which the ruler or in which the person in charge would have to collect land revenues and taxes due to the state from the piece of land in which he was given. In return, he had to maintain a body of troops for the service of the ruler. This grant was not hereditary and it could be changed on the wish of the ruler. He could also be transferred. The Sultan, however, drew revenues directly from pieces of land which were called Khalisa. So there were two different pieces or two different tracts of land which were governed or administered differently. One was Sikta, which was governed in which the governor or in which the Turkish chief who was given or who was allotted that piece would collect the land revenues and taxes, and in return he would maintain a piece of troops which would be at the disposal of the Sultan. And the next was the Khalisa, which would give all of its land revenues and all of its revenues directly to the king. So these were actually administered by the Turkish officers who were basically the slaves of the sultans and who had been trained for warfare and grew in Sultan's service. In terms of personal bravery, the Rajputs were in no way inferior to the Turks. In this context, the role of religion and caste in the military organization should not be unduly exaggerated. While the Turks were imbued with the Ghazi spirit, the Rajputs considered retreat in battle to be a dishonor. Also, caste did not prevent non-Rajputs or the Hu-Varnas lower caste from taking part in the battle, so that the Rajput armies were larger in numbers to those fielded by the Turks. Finally, the Rajput defeat at the hands of Muizzuddin Muhammad should be seen in the context of the past few centuries. From the end of the 10th century, the Turks had started reconnoitering India. The Rajputs did put up spirited and prolonged resistance and defeated the Turkish Empire armies a number of times, but the Rajputs lacked what might be called a strategic vision. Once the outer bastions of India, Kabul and Lahore had fallen to Turks, no concerted attempt was made by the Rajputs to recover it. The little effort was made to push the Ghaznavids out of the Punjab. The gaze of the Rajputs remained fixed in India and they paid little attention to developments outside, especially to Central Asia, which had often played a key role in shaping the history of India. So with this we have come to an end of this chapter on the age of conflict. I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, see ya, bye.